It's been a month since Pagan Online released, and I think it's safe to say mistakes have been made. Somehow, the released version of the game was basically worse than the early access version. Hey everyone, this is Thyworm, and today I want to look at the launch of Pagan Online, some of the issues that keep plaguing this game, and finally the current state and its future. I've been creating content for Pagan Online throughout most of the early access. I was heavily invested in the game, played it for hundreds of hours, made guides and tutorials, and overall I had a lot of fun doing that. It even got me to Gamescom, to the developer stand, hosting a live stream in Cologne, which was awesome. Early access all started in April, and gradually Pagan Online became a better and better game, with community feedback taken into account by the developers. It was getting better and better, but by no means was it a finished product. It had some pretty big issues still. Some of the main issues were co-op lag, connectivity in general, a lack of endgame, and repetitive gameplay. Despite these issues, Pagan Online still got a release date, and since the release announcement, quite a few mistakes have been made, I feel. The first mistake was releasing the game at all. Pagan Online was a pretty decent game, but the glaring bugs and some of the gameplay issues were not resolved, even though they existed for months in many cases. Optimization is a gradual process, but Pagan Online never reached an optimal or playable co-op state during early access, with players that got disconnected a lot, co-op lagging sometimes up to multiple seconds, and a campaign that wasn't playable in co-op mode. And you have to realize that the campaign is the bulk of the early and mid-game action in this action RPG. For a game that calls itself Pagan Online, as many people pointed out, also in reviews, that's a pretty big issue. During release, these issues were all still not fixed. In fact, they got worse, but we'll get to that. This game should have never been released in the state it did, because at launch it would really only satisfy the hardcore fans, but they already bought the game, so who cares, right? And some new players that would enjoy the pretty decent campaign and leveling gameplay loop solo. Because anyone wanting to play co-op would be very frustrated very soon. Just to be clear here, I still believe Pagan Online is worth the money, even a new price tag of €25, just for the very enjoyable solo campaign leveling experience. But that is not the point of this video, because it being worth the money and it being released like it did are two completely different things. Another reason that Pagan wasn't ready was the lack of some actual new features. Sure, there were some new heroes to play, but was that enough? Would this game be able to live up to the hype it created during early access, with regular updates and great community engagement? During early access, there was a very active community that supported the game through thick and thin, that was genuinely excited for the releases, and that basically wished Mad Hat Games all the best. This community was carefully cultivated, it was moderated properly, and a lot of time and effort was put into the Discord primarily. The tension towards release was really tangible. You could feel the excitement in response to the devlogs, the dev posts, and all those kind of things. But in the end, Pagan Online didn't live up to the hype. It's such a shame that this opportunity was squandered, really, and for what? I truly don't understand the decision making regarding the release, which brings us to the second mistake, releasing at the same time as classic World of Warcraft. I argued in one of my previous videos that I really didn't think it was that big of a deal releasing at the same time as classic WoW. I basically agreed with Mirko, mentioning in a dev stream that Mad Hat Games doesn't really consider World of Warcraft to be a competitor, because you could play multiple games at once. On paper, that doesn't sound completely illogical, but in reality, we're talking about classic World of Warcraft here, one of the most addictive experiences I had in the last 5 years, and I can tell for a fact that whenever you play World of Warcraft Classic and you like it, you will not be playing any other game. I was very wrong in my previous videos, and maybe a little naive as well. I have totally underestimated the impact of classic WoW, which gobbled up all the attention from basically the entire online gaming community, dominating headlines, dominating YouTube videos, dominating Twitch, and to some extent dominating parts of the Pagan Online community as well. I was an avid WoW player back in the days of vanilla, and I popped into Classic just to have a look, see what it's like, right? I spent 2 full weeks playing the game pretty much non-stop when not working. Other content creators displayed similar urges, like Bearded Check and Ferlina streaming Classic WoW instead of Pagan Online. Any attempt at marketing the game basically failed, because no one was interested in anything but World of Warcraft. I think this is reflected in the amount of reviews that have been available on the game. Now, I've looked at YouTube for reviews. They are really hard to find. Looking at Metacritic, there are only 8 articles on the game, averaging a score of 66, which seems like a fair score to me, by the way. No one is talking about this game. I'm still getting people in my stream that never heard about it, even though they're big fans of the action RPG genre. In terms of marketing, it's been a disaster. Let's talk about the release itself. Was it good? Did it work? No, it didn't. Which is mistake number 3. Imagine playing the early access for a month or 2. You have all characters unlocked and you've collected many legendaries, which require a lot of time and a ton of grind. And all those legendaries are nicely, safely stored away in your stash. At launch, all early access players kept their progression. The game released, you play a game of co-op, you return to the Pantheon to your stash, and everything in your stash is gone. All legendaries, all set items, all is gone. You create a ticket at Wargaming and it takes 1.5 to 2 weeks to restore your account to the point before the chest wipe. During those 2 weeks, you can't really play the game, because all progression will be rolled back to the point before the chest wipe, making everything you do basically pointless. This didn't just happen to a few people. I've had multiple online friends from within the community that suffered from this issue, and if the forums are any indication, a lot of people did, resulting in a lot of people being unable to play the game for 2 weeks at launch. These chest wipe bugs were already known before the release, because they were reported by content creators when they were testing the release build and making content about it. I think Wargaming should have moved the launch, because if this isn't a game-breaking bug, I don't know what is. But postponing an entire launch seems unrealistic, I guess, at least a week in advance. But then they should have disabled co-op or something, or do something to prevent this from happening, right? Because the people I know that suffered from this bug just started playing other games and never really returned to Pagan Online. Unfortunately, this wasn't the only bug that made it into the release. Numerous other bugs made it into that build as well, like the game being completely unplayable with a controller or a fair amount of skills not functioning correctly. But more importantly, key issues were not fixed, like the co-op lag, connectivity with players continuously disconnecting, and a boring endgame. The latter you can make an argument for fixing later, and that would have been fine, but the co-op part is advertised as such a vital component of this game that it seems unacceptable that it basically didn't work for a large amount of people and that the campaign couldn't be played in co-op. A week after launch, September 3rd, a hotfix was implemented for the co-op stash bug. While it did fix the wiped stash issues, it introduced some new co-op bugs, because now invites would time out and people wouldn't be able to play co-op at all anymore. The workaround was to log out of the game for 5 minutes, both of you who wanted to play together, and then log back in and try again. It seemed to work for a while, this workaround, but these days it doesn't anymore, it seems, resulting in players simply unable to play co-op entirely. New patches introducing severe issues have been a recurring theme during development. Almost every time a new patch got implemented, something vital broke. Patch 0.2 caused all kinds of co-op features to bug out, like looking for group lists, invites and connectivity issues. Also, there were tons of lag. Patch 0.3 introduced a legendaries that completely froze the game, and a bug that made crit damage completely disappear. Patch 0.4 introduced bugs that crashed your game when hovering over certain items in your inventory. Patch 0.5 caused a bug that prevented players from connecting to the servers in a mission, resulting in playing an entire mission and then getting disconnected, losing all progress and loot time and time again. Hotfix 0.5.3 fixed some issues, but also introduced one where complete player accounts were being wiped. And the list goes on. What's my point? My point is not about quality assurance or development practices or anything like that. My point is about 2 things. 1. Pagan Online has an extensive history of patches breaking the game and hotfixes making things worse. During early access, that's not great, but it's also not a big issue, I feel. It's early access after all, the game will be buggy, you might lose progress, you might lose items, all those things could happen and are to be forgiven as well. You are basically beta testing a game here. But once you release a game, these practices need to stop. And they didn't, because hotfixes have introduced bugs that at the moment of writing still exist and prevent players from playing this game in co-op mode. 2. If you look at the type of bugs we're dealing with, the game-breaking ones basically, they're all roughly the same. They all have to do with co-op, with connectivity and with unintentional wipes, either of items, of stashes or entire accounts. What's become apparent over the last 7 months is that Pagan Online has some fundamental issues which they can't seem to get under control, because even at launch entire stashes were wiped and it took them weeks to recover the items and allow players to continue their journey. And there are not that many signs of improvement either. This is not a new thing. This has been happening throughout the development of the game. And if they don't get these issues under control, I really don't see much of a point in creating new content. I strongly feel these issues should have been addressed before the launch of the game, so that anyone playing Pagan can actually enjoy it and play it as intended. Pagan Online should have released in December or something, to allow for plenty of time to work on the issues and bugs. Instead, it made some weird decision and launched in a premature state, with game-breaking bugs, hardly any marketing exposure and generally mixed reviews on both Steam and the official media outlets. The player count is dropped back after an initial surge at launch, back to the levels they had during the early access, and these days even below those numbers. I'm confident the reviews took its toll there, and what I really hoped wouldn't happen, Pagan Online launching with too many bugs, is exactly what people mention now in their reviews. It's such a shame that a game that has this much potential was not allowed the proper amount of time necessary to polish the game and really make a dent in the action RPG landscape, because I think they could have. So, is it all over? I really hope for everyone involved that Mad Hat Games is capable of turning this around, that they can fix the bugs, that they can provide us with an interesting endgame, that they can give us a reason to start playing Pagan Online again, because I want to, but since the launch I just couldn't be bothered. I wanted to make a video to give my perspective on the launch of Pagan Online, not because I want to be negative about it. I mean, I created almost 60 mostly positive videos about this game. I wish this game the very best and its developers, which I personally met as well, but I must conclude that a lot of things went wrong here. I will keep covering the game in terms of patch notes, discussions and noteworthy news. In the meantime, I really hope the devs can turn this around. Thanks so much for watching and making it to the end. Bye bye.